I'm your host, Catherine Hadro, coming to you at the top of the show from the White House, where President Donald Trump today met with an abortion attempt survivor and other pro-lifers who beat the odds just by being born. This meeting comes in the wake of extreme abortion legislation and recent comments by Virginia Governor Ralph Northam, which sounded like a defense of infanticide. President Trump sat down with pro-lifers whom our viewers may recognize from the show, including Micah Pickering, a young boy who was born at just 20 weeks, Catherine Alexander, a little girl adopted after being born with an opiate addiction, and abortion attempt survivor Melissa Ohden, whom we spoke with right after the meeting. Melissa Ohden is here with us at the White House right after her meeting with President Trump. Melissa, thanks for being with us.
It's my pleasure.
For our viewers who are not familiar with your story, can you tell us a little bit about your witness?
I'm the survivor of a failed abortion. It was 41 years ago that my biological mother, as a college student, had a saline infusion abortion forced upon her against her will. That type of procedure was the most common one back in the 1970s, but it involved injecting a toxic salt solution into the amniotic fluid surrounding the preborn baby in the womb. The intent of that toxic salt solution was to poison and scald the child to death. And usually the procedure lasted about 72 hours. The child would soak in that toxic salt solution, and after their life was successfully ended by it, then premature labor was induced with the intent of that deceased child being delivered. In my circumstances, we know I actually soaked in that toxic salt solution for 5 days, just because they couldn't successfully induce her labor until that 5th day. And so on the 5th day of that abortion procedure, I was delivered at St. Luke's Hospital in Sioux City, Iowa, believing that I would be a successful abortion. And lo and behold, I was accidentally born alive.
Wow, and here you are today.
And here I am,
and
right?
Here you are, and you are such a bold witness. So tell us about being at the meeting with President Trump. What was that like? What did you get to say to him?
It was absolutely surreal, right? I described it as someone else of like, you have one of those moments where you're going, I was meant to be here today, right? This is what I was called to do. And so sitting in that Oval Office with him and hearing him talk so passionately about his commitment to life and what he's willing to keep doing legislatively to protect lives like mine. It's absolutely surreal. I am just so thankful for him and this administration and the bold moves he continues to make so that lives like mine can be protected in our society.
What is your impression of what President Trump thinks of this extreme abortion legislation we're continuing to see across the nation?
Oh, you can tell he thinks it's just an abomination, right? He talked a lot about Governor Northam and his comments in Virginia, about some of the other states making these same aggressive moves against life. And really, I appreciate that he made it a battle cry, right? That this is a movement. He kept using the word movement, and I love that so much. He said, he said, I think there's more that's been happening in terms of movement in the last couple of weeks than we've seen in a long time. And it's because people see what is happening and they're not willing to, sit by quietly or remain silent. And so he was just such a great encouragement for all of us to be moving in our own communities to stand up in defense of life.
Wow. Finally, Melissa, as so much of this extreme abortion legislation is in the news, from Governor Cuomo signing that bill into law to Governor Northam's comments, what do you see as your role today? I mean, you just met with the President of the United States.
That sounds so funny to hear come out of some. You met with the President of the United States. What next? You know what? I feel like I'm going to keep following God wherever he leads me, right? If that means that I keep coming back to Washington and, standing up for legislative bills that will make a difference, I will do that. If it means that I am still out in the trenches, of course, helping pregnancy centers and other organizations educate and raise funds to serve people in their communities. But I just know that I think survivors are a huge part of this conversation that needs to take place, whether it's Washington or some other community, these lives like mine that exist that have been impacted by abortion need to be heard.
Absolutely, and I hope that you continue to speak out and be a witness. Thank you so much for being with us today. Melissa Ohden, an abortion attempt survivor, thank you.
Thank you.
And as I mentioned, Melissa wasn't the only one sitting at the meeting with President Trump. Trump also sat down with pro-lifer Christina Bennett, Dr. Alveda King, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s niece, and a frequent guest on the show, pro-life leader Marjorie Dannenfelser. And joining us here from the White House is Marjorie Dannenfelser, president of the Susan B. Anthony List, who helped to plan today's pro-life meeting. Marjorie, thanks for speaking with us on this busy day.
Oh, well, this is the fun part.
This is incredible. What can you tell us about how this meeting came about?
Well, it came from the president and from the staff. He is really consumed with this moment of what we're seeing in New York and in Virginia, in this national conversation now about late-term abortion and even abortions or infanticide. He is really on fire about that, and it hurts his heart like it does all of us. He decided, and the White House staff helped us, and we helped them pull together the people who this conversation is really about, the Melissa Odens, and Catherine Alexander, and those beautiful people. So we got together, met with them, had a good chance to brief the president on where the Born Alive Act is standing.
That's incredible. What struck you most about the meeting? Did the president say anything in particular? What should our viewers know?
Well, part of the meeting was when he was on a conference call with thousands and thousands of pro-life people across the country. So we were all sitting there in the Oval Office, the families, these beautiful families, and kids running around, and the president's at the on the phone. And he almost always comes back to what really just gets him, and it's what he said at that final debate with Hillary Clinton. He just said, who could be for pulling a baby limb to limb out of limb from limb out of the womb of a mother? It always comes back to him, and honestly, that's what the pro-life movement should always be keeping at the center. The beauty of the child, the unique privilege that it is to have children, and then also the contrast with what happens to that child during an abortion. That's what's got him.
What kind of impact do you think today's meeting will have on the president and meeting with these people who have beat the odds just by being born? How do you think that's going to impact him for the remainder of his term and fulfilling those pro-life promises?
I think it deepens his commitment. It deepens his understanding of what we're talking about. He has a new appreciation for what the pro-life movement is, who we are, who are the faces of it, what is the damage that's done. When you really come face to face with the horror that abortion is, you can't help but be attracted to this movement and the good people in it and want to do something. This president is the only president ever that has engaged in this particular personal way. And I don't mean that other presidents haven't personally felt it. What I mean is he's taken this on like he takes on a political campaign. He wants to keep this high in the mind of the public and have a public conversation about it, so that he, and as in his words were today, I want that bill on my desk.
Which bill in particular? The Born Alive
Yes,
bill?
The Born Alive Infant Protection Act. He wants that bill on his desk. It seems like a heavy lift given who we're talking about right now in the Congress, but he gets a lot of things done.
Speaking of the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act, what should our viewers know about this bill? It keeps getting not held up in Congress.
Yeah. Well, we're in good shape in the Senate. That obviously is we'll certainly have the votes there. We don't have 60 votes because we know the Democrats will try to block it, but we will have a vote coming up very soon. Okay. We think it could be within a few weeks even. So on the Senate side, they'll be discussing that, and we'll be getting ready for that. There'll be a hearing on the Senate side, actually maybe after that vote. On the House side, there will be a unanimous consent request. That's just basically a congressman saying, will everybody please consent to have a vote on this bill every single day for 30 days until there's what's called a discharge petition. And that's when enough members of Congress sign a discharge petition so that it's allowed for a vote on the floor of the House. Obviously, with Nancy Pelosi as Speaker, she will not allow this bill to be voted on, and we all know why. I think one of the most important things, and this is something that the President brought up in the Oval Office today, and that is, I want to know how every Democrat stands on this. And he said, and it's going to be really quite a contrast when we're moving into the next election, his re-election, where everybody on the other side is standing firm for late-term abortion and even abortion after the after the birth of the baby, and he's going to be standing for something very different. So what I foresee is that this stays high profile for a long time until
Okay.
we get something done.
And see if that momentum continues through the 2020
That's right.
election as well.
Yeah.
Marjorie Dannenfelser, president of the Students Meet Anthony List, thanks for speaking with us and being with us today.
Thank you.
God bless.
God bless.